So let's return to this diagram just to bring it all back and refresh your memory. So we've got Limbo over here. I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor flitting about. And the purpose of Limbo is to manage new token listings. So that's the dotted arrow to Behodler. So Limbo raises capital for a potential token listing on Behodler, and if enough capital is brought in, a bunch of migration mechanics kick in, and the capital is migrated to Behodler, where it becomes tradable. Then the next step is to explain how Limbo rewards the users, but to do that we first need to kind of take an iterative approach to how we could solve this problem of raising capital for Behodler and then distributing it amongst the users. So I have to be careful not to get into too much crypto economic theory, because that's not going to help. If you're a warden or an auditor, it's not going to help to have a complete comprehensive crypto economic view. It's more just something that I enjoy talking about, so I need to try and hold back on that. Let's see if I can do that. So if we were to design a crowdfunding app from the get-go, and let's say we don't have Limbo as it is, one way we could do it is we could lock up capital. So when users stake capital, it becomes locked in a contract, but we don't reward them with anything. So it's not like a traditional liquidity mining DApp. They don't receive any yield. Their capital just sits in a smart contract locked. And when we reach the threshold, the promise is that when we reach the threshold, all of that capital is ported to Behodler and listed on Behodler. Now, recall when I spoke about Behodler, I said that when you add liquidity to Behodler, the liquidity token scarcity is minted. So what we can do in a naive crowdfunding, a kind of Web 2.0 way of going about it, would be to mint that scarcity with the new capital, and then to distribute it in proportion to the staking of the original users. So you would put in, let's say we raised $10,000 worth of capital for a new token, and that generates, let's say it generates 100 scarcity. So that means that that's one scarcity for every $100 staked. So you come along and you stake $250, so you get 2.5 scarcity from that. I hope I did that that arithmetic correctly. But anyway, you get the point. So the scarcity is divided according to your value. So the main problem with this, of course, is who wants to stake capital and just lock it away and wait. There are dApps like that, and they were quite popular last year, but I think increasingly it's becoming a norm in DeFi to expect a yield immediately when you bring tokens to a dApp. And if you don't, you need to be given a very good reason for why you're not getting a yield. So the incentives for the users in this scenario, where you stake and you just wait and you hope that the threshold is reached, the incentive is a collective one. The idea, I guess, it would work well in a community where the community was so cohesive that they could all coordinate with each other to bring the capital at once or within a day or two, to make that migration happen so that they can all get their scarcity. But generally there isn't a lot of cohesiveness amongst DeFi users or users on the internet, and that might be a good or a bad thing depending on how you understand decentralization, but nonetheless it's a reality. So it's unlikely for most tokens that you're going to achieve the desired ends unless you have some sort of incredible marketing strategy every time you do that. But again, it's always a kind of a chicken and an egg sort of thing for users. You could make it, I guess, you could make it that the users could unstake at any point and just hope that amongst the bubbling of a staking and unstaking you eventually cross that threshold. But again, it's a subpar experience for what people are used to in DeFi. So this is where the token flan comes in. So flan is an unlimited minting token, very similar to sushi or curve. that is minted and issued to Limbo stakers as a reward. Now, where Flan differs fundamentally from the other two tokens that I mentioned, and from most liquidity mining tokens, is that it's not a governance token, which means that it doesn't have those governance economics driving the demand for Flan, which means that we have to have a different set of economics. We have to capture value in some other way to support the value of Flan, lest it just becomes a tool of hyperinflation. So this is what we do. When a token is listed on Behodler, we generate scarcity, and we can use that scarcity to purchase Flan on the open market, and that bumps up the price of Flan. And then with that increased price of Flan, we now have a bit of runway to mint Flan and issue it as a reward to the Limbo users. Now, the reason we have this kind of indirect approach is because it means that between migrations we can still be issuing new Flan, and we don't have to know when the migrations happen. We just have to know that there's a sort of regularity to migrations, so that once in a while we know that scarcity will be minted because of a new migration, and it will be used to bump up the price of Flan, which then allows us to mint Flan to reward the users, and hopefully the price of Flan doesn't drop so much that the next scarcity bump isn't big enough. So that's iteration 2, and that's not perfect, but it's an improvement, because it means then that we can have a kind of a market value for Flan, and we can just have an ongoing minting of Flan, similar to how sushi is minted when you stake in the MasterChef contract. So it smooths out the experience a little bit. There are a number of other tokenomic reasons why it would be nicer to have a regular token like Flan or Sushi or Curve as a reward token rather than scarcity, because scarcity behaves quite funnily. So scarcity is because I recall that I mentioned that scarcity is a claim on marginal value of trade, and that can be quite hard to get one's head around, but what it means is that what scarcity can redeem from Behodler in terms of value is a proportion of existing liquidity. So at any point in time, if you have 18 scarcity, for instance, you can withdraw half of the reserve liquidity of a given token from Behodler, and it doesn't matter if that reserve is $100 or $100,000. 18 scarcity will get you half. 25 scarcity is about enough to get you the entire reserve of a particular token from Behodler. So this creates a kind of a peculiar set of economics. There are pros and cons to it, but it doesn't make for a very good ongoing minting and reward token. It's got the implication of being able to mint proportions of liquidity from Behodler rather than quantities of liquidity are that one of the implications is that the scarcity price can be quite volatile. So it's not ideal if you're receiving a reward token that's particularly volatile. It would be nicer if that token could be more stable in price. So this is another benefit to Flan. We can actually engineer Flan to approach increasing stability with every migration. So I'll explain that next.